What story are you living right now? I've been thinking about The Truman Show. Truman is born into a reality TV show and he slowly realizes that the world around him has been engineered. His wife is chosen for him. His fears are planned to keep him in line. Someone else is controlling his story. Now, I'm not saying that our lives are literally staged. America is not The Truman Show. But so much of what we call normal is shaped by the movies we watched and the shows we stream, our feeds, even the stories we tell in our faith communities. Lately, it feels like different parts of our country are living inside very different stories, maybe incompatible ones. We consume different media bubbles and we're formed into different people. So what do we do? How do we learn to notice the stories that form us? And can we really choose better stories for ourselves? From the H.E. Foundation, this is the Echoes podcast. Today, our guest is Alissa Wilkinson, writer, cultural critic, and a film critic at the New York Times. Her new book, We Tell Ourselves Stories, looks at Hollywood as an American dream machine and asks, what happens when that dream starts to splinter? We talk about movies, reality TV, and the stories that form us in faith communities, and we'll get practical about how to stay tethered to the truth while still letting story do its deep work. I'm here with my co-host, Camille Hall Ortega. Alissa,
Hello.
welcome.
Thanks. It's so good to be here. I'm so glad we can do this.
Yes, we're so
Yes.
excited to have you.
So you talk about the Hollywood dream machine in your book. Can you explain what that phrase means to our audience?
So first of all, when you think about Hollywood, often it is the place where people see movies that tell them what they should want, or kind of what aspirations they have. And America has always been a very optimistic country. You leave your home and you strike out across the country, and you're going to build a home for yourself and a new future. So that's part of the dream machine. It's where those dreams are literally created for people, and they get those ideas in their head. But there's also this other weird thing that happens when you watch a movie, which is that the actual physical experience of watching a movie, especially in a theater, is very like a dream. You kind of go in this dark space. Maybe you struggle to stay awake. You're watching this thing happen before you on a big screen for a couple hours. And it's, and then you kind of wake up out of it, right? And so you almost have this thing happen in your subconscious, and it sort of lodges somewhere. And it's not just you who had that experience, it's everyone who was in the room with you and in any room where that movie was playing. So it's like a collective dream. It's a collective subconscious, and we all have that experience together. So Hollywood is a place where all of us are having our dreams manufactured. And in fact, the American movie industry has been a place where America has told itself stories about what it is. Who are we as a nation? What is our history together? What kind of a people are we? And as the American film industry has exported its movies over time, that has, been globalized. And, a third piece of this, as I talk about a lot in the book, is that over time, the American movie industry has kind of become the way that we process our real lives. So now, if I'm thinking about maybe, going out and dating, I'm probably going to process a lot of my experiences through romantic comedies that I watch. Or if a war starts in part of the world, often we look at the footage and think of it in terms of movies we've seen. So we're actually like thinking about real events in terms of, fictional depictions of those events. So it's all kind of like acting back on itself, and it's like a little factory where those dreams are created. So all of that, I think is a way to think about what happens in Hollywood. And I don't think of that as necessarily a good or a bad thing, but it is something that is very important for us to be aware of when we're thinking about what the effect over the last century of, of the entertainment industry has been on, on the American century, but also on the world.
You're explaining that, this is about 100 years old, this industry here in America. What substantive changes have you seen, spoken about, talked about, realized over that time?
Yeah, so many. I mean, you just think back to 100 years ago. I mean, I was talking about this at work recently. 100 years ago, Buster Keaton's movie The General came out, so
Mm.
that's 100 years, and that's a
Wow.
silent film. So
That's aged
Wow.
well, though. Buster Keaton is still good.
aged incredibly well, and it's still a very influential film. But if you think about everything that's happened in the meantime in the
Right.
world and in the movies, we've got sounds, we've got color, we've got longer films, we've got digital. We've had many different changes in what the audience wants to see. Do they
Yeah.
want epics? Do they want sort of gritty realism? Do they want, the action films of the 80s? Do they want kind of the 90s comedy or that kind of thing? We've had superhero films, which really crop up right after 9/11 when we're yearning for a
Mm.
hero.
Oh,
And
right.
then we have this whole other parallel thing that happens, which is the rise of television. And then, of course, of the internet later and all of the things that that brought. So we actually have a fracturing of the entertainment landscape where movies were kind of it for a while. Then TV came along and kind of ate a big part of that. And so movies had to come up with a way to compete. And then,
Yeah.
and they did, and they figured it out. But then, there's uh, new things that are always coming along. And one of the most interesting things about the movie industry is always that it's an art form that is equally married to commercial and technological um, changes, basically. So it's
Yeah.
it's never just one
Mm.
thing. And so every time a new technology comes along, it changes. And they're always they have to work with commercial interests. So all of those things are true. And on the flip side, it really has seeped into our sort of political and public culture as well. We in the 80s we had an actual movie star who became
Right.
president, but
Yeah.
before that, Kennedy they talked about in terms of movie stardom. And before that, actually, Barry Goldwater, they talked about in terms of he looked like a movie star. So certainly just the feeling that we were watching our public life as entertainment was already happening long before the rise of anything current, but certainly anything, decades ago.
Right.
So,
Right.
Yeah.
so many changes.
Well, and
Yeah.
even after Reagan, we had Clinton, who was sort of a performer.
That's right.
We had George W., who's like a cowboy.
Yep.
All of these different people not adopting, but having personas imposed on them that we recognize from film. I
Yes, that's
I
exactly
want
right.
to I want to go back to the idea of the dream machine. You've talked about it being fragmented. Do you think I have a two-part question? Do you think it is broken in that it's no longer producing dreams for us? And do you think it's broken in the sense that it's no longer producing good dreams for us?
Mm. I mean, I don't think it's broken in the sense that one way to think about it, I had a colleague who used to say that a way to think about what it's doing is telling us what we're anxious about.
Hmm.
And I'll give you
Oh.
this example. It's actually become kind of a joke among film critics right now that every movie AI is the villain. Like even movies where
Interesting.
you wouldn't think AI could be the villain. And this has become very, very, very true. I have seen two movies this week where you would never think AI could be the villain, and it was. And I won't even say what they are.
Oh, I'm excited to ask you. Yes.
But I thought, I walked into the movie and thought, well, there's no way this one. But yes, it actually was. So that tells you something, right? And it's not just that some studio executive is saying, well, you got to figure out a way to get AI in there, right? Because, of course, the studio executives don't want AI to be the villain. They
Sure.
want to use AI. It's just clear that we're all feeling the anxiety and we're trying to work it out together. And that I think that's what we do in our dreams, right? If you're anxious about something, you
Oh,
go to
yeah.
bed and it pops up in some weird way in your dream. So there is that kind of subconscious thing that's happening.
You're referencing it a bit there, but I'm very curious because I imagine that in this conversation, we'll talk a lot about sort of this dark side of that dream machine. But I'm also curious about the light side or the bright
Mhm.
side there. What are
Yes.
the good things that come from um, aspirational views of movies?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's so much, right? There's been so many movies where people watch them and they see, for instance, a healthy friendship I think friendship is one of those places that's especially true because there are movies that are full of examples of friends who support one another and are one another's, most vital relationships. And that is something that often is very countercultural
Yeah.
to the way that we talk about friendship in other places.
Yeah.
And
Can
I
you give an
think,
example of like a
oh,
favorite friendship?
oh my goodness. Well, now you're asking me a difficult question. I'm just thinking of like there are there are plenty of movies that are sort of
I'm
in
thinking
in
of
that
My
realm.
Girl, and then I'm like, "Oh, now I feel a little bit sad," but I'm
No,
thinking
I
of
know. Well,
My Girl too. Yeah. Yeah.
there are a lot of those. You can't ask me for examples off the top of my head. My brain is so crammed
You're
full
like,
of
"I have
movies all the
25."
time.
Okay.
I
Okay.
know.
All right. I'm just
Um,
gonna throw out Frodo and Samwise.
yeah, sure. Yes, Frodo and the Lord of
Oh.
the Rings, great. But yes, no, but I mean, I think I think that often, we're told that a friend can't be your person or whatever, and we see,
Mm.
that, or I was talking to. Sometimes I'll talk to people and they'll say, "Oh, there are no movies where you see clergy who are good," and I'll say that's not true. There's actually quite a lot of them,
Mhm, mhm.
and
Used to be required by law.
there's quite a lot of them, and there are current ones too, and so that
Yeah.
there's a lot of these or communities that pull together.
I'm thinking also just about representation, and for me, I
Yes.
think that's a huge thing
Hmm.
because we know even from data that when you see yourself in
Yeah,
something, you believe more that that could also be you.
Right.
And so this
absolutely.
aspirational view where we go, that wasn't always the case that we
Hmm.
saw representation in film, but how wonderful that I can think about my kids watching a film like Hidden Figures and
Yes.
knowing that even though it's telling a story that's from many, many years ago, it is being brought to light in a time where it
Yeah.
is so important that kids and adults alike can see themselves and go, aha, I'm
Yeah.
represented here in a way that allows me to aspire sometimes uniquely where that might not have happened.
Yeah,
That's
that's
such a
exactly right.
fantastic movie.
Yeah, it
Love
really
that movie.
Yes.
is. Yeah, and there didn't used to be space in the industry for those kinds of movies. It really took a lot of pushing to just have people greenlight those kinds of projects
Yeah.
because there was received
Mm.
wisdom that, oh, they won't do well at the box office. But, as soon as
Right.
people are proven wrong,
Yeah.
then they start getting made, and that's really wonderful.
I love this book a lot. I've read it
Thank you.
twice, which is really that's very unusual for me to do that. And so when somebody hears that there's a book about Joan Didion, they might be like, but that's I
I
mean
didn't know who
Joan
she was.
Didion.
Yeah.
I mean,
But now
I'm
I do.
embarrassed to say I didn't
Yeah.
really either. I had
Yeah.
like heard the name and I recognized her face, but she is really the main character walking us through this way of thinking about storytelling and this way of thinking about American storytelling specifically.
Hmm.
One of the things she says, she talks about that telling the truth about what something is what movies do. And so
Yeah.
there's one point where she talks about a Western that is not particularly a good movie, but it's a true Western. So she's like, I like it.
Hmm.
That's a terrible paraphrase of your section, but I'm curious, what helps a person tell the difference in today's media between this idea of the truth of what something is and just the constant spin from every side that we're getting?
Yeah, I mean it's hard, right? Because it's so many layers of buildup at this point of spin. It can be hard. I always think that there is a kind of intuition that you have when someone
Mm.
is not not giving it to you straight. And I think one reason I really admire Didion as a writer, and if you read her directly, she has no tolerance for spin at all. She just sees right through it. And later in her life, she became a political writer, and it is just some of the most incredible political writing I've ever read. She considered herself a conservative basically through to the end of her life, but people almost don't realize it because she treated everyone exactly the same. And if she detected spin, she had no mercy. So it's really great to read her and kind of get that feeling. We don't have a lot of writers like her anymore. And I think for her, it was very much about the language that people used. So she would see she would think about whether someone was using language to obfuscate the truth. Were they using jargon? Were they using what she thought of as pernicious nostalgia? That was a phrase that she would use a lot. Was she hearing sentimentalization in the language? Were people trying to tell the story of a golden age that never existed? All of these
Yeah.
things to her were an indication that something was not true. And I think that that for her was really important.
Alyssa, when people talk about spin, they normally are thinking about like media spin, journalism spin. And what I hear you saying is that through nostalgia, through all of these other things, we actually get spin within our narrative storytelling, our fictional storytelling. Can you talk a little bit
Mm.
more about that and the role of what we're spinning to each other?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the question is, are we starting from the right premise, right? Are we starting from
Mhm.
the truthful premise of what was in the past and what is happening now? Like, the cause and effect, really. That's what a story is. This happened, and so this is happening. Didion, when she wrote We Tell Ourselves Stories in Order to Live, that's what she's writing about is she goes on to say we look at a headline in a newspaper and we construct a story around the headline in order to comfort ourselves. So we see something scary happening and we try to come up with a reason for why it's happening in order to make sense of it because the
Mhm.
world is full of scary headlines, basically, and it's completely chaotic to live in a world with disconnected headlines. And so we have to come up with a reason for it. But there's a danger to that because we can invent stories about why things happen in order to comfort ourselves that have no root or basis in the truth at all. They just are, rooted and based in perhaps a dream that Hollywood told us, or perhaps a dream that we've inherited from a story we've been telling ourselves or our family or our community tells about itself that actually isn't based in fact or it's based in a half truth or something
Mm.
like that. And I love what Camille was saying about hidden figures because that's a great example of going back to history and sort of taking the true story and telling it. That story is really wild in some ways that I didn't know it. I actually studied computer science as an undergraduate, and I had no idea these women even existed. And in a way, that history was hidden from me.
Why didn't I know it to begin with? Why
Right.
wasn't it a part of the canon of, whatever the field or whatever, that
Exactly.
kind of thing?
Yeah.
That's so important. Yep. I'm wondering, you have spoken about how there can be sort of a war on creativity. I've
Oh,
seen it that this idea that we're almost drawn to divisiveness
Hmm.
is one of the reasons you have said that being a film critic is important to you. Can you speak more about the importance of the work that you're doing and what you think it helps us with?
Yeah. I mean, this can be counterintuitive to people, I think, because a lot of people think that being a film critic is about like hating movies and tearing them down. um, so I think about this exactly opposite, and I would say that most good film critics or critics of any kind do
uh-huh.
too. So the job of a critic is to create a new work of art. First of all, that's what I think I'm
Mhm.
doing when I write a piece of criticism. I'm not saying it's always great art, but that's what I'm aiming to do. Um, and what I'm doing is recording my encounter with a work of art so that my reader can have their own encounter with that work of art in a more rich and full way. Our world is full of this idea that you can either have this opinion or this opinion, and one of them is correct. And one of the beautiful things about art is there isn't a correct opinion to have about a work of art. Um, Ever. Like you might hate a movie
Yeah.
and I might love it, and neither of us is correct. Um, and also you may also feel medium about it, and we're all right.
Yeah.
So if we can then talk about it, if we can have a conversation about it, then we're actually demonstrating something really interesting about human experience, which
Mm,
is that everybody brings themselves to the world with kind of the richness and fullness of who they are, their life, their experience, their perspectives. Um,
yeah.
and we can civilly sit down and have a conversation about that. And in so doing, learn about one another, right? That's the
Yeah.
Wow.
beautiful thing that art gives us. And criticism, I think is the first place that we can do that. Like, I write a review. This is something that very often happens to me, especially since I got to the New York Times, just because a lot of people read the New York Times. I
Yeah.
write a review, I publish it, it happens every week, and then I'll get emails from people. And usually they're really nice emails, and they're just from people who are like, I read your review, I went and saw the movie, here's what I thought. And
Wow.
then they just want to tell me. And it's like
Yeah.
literally we're having a conversation, we've connected about the movie
Oh,
that they
that's
saw.
adorable.
I love
I love it.
that.
Some of them, if I don't hear from them, I'll email them because I'm like, "Are you
How have you
doing
been?
okay?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a
Um,
chance to practice civil discourse, civil disagreement with lower
yeah.
stakes, theoretically. I know that, yeah, I know that it's
Yes.
only a theory.
Yes.
Yeah,
Hopefully, you're not going to, ruin a friendship over, I liked that movie and you liked it less.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Unless, it's
Although,
The Lord of the Rings.
Unless it's the Lord of the
yeah,
Rings.
yeah,
Yes.
I'm pretty sure my friends are tired of me talking about Tron as well. I want to go back to this idea of criticism and how you
Mhm.
understand the role of the critic. Before this conversation, I was thinking. I mean, when I think of the ultimate critic, I think of Ego
Mhm.
from Ratatouille.
Ratatouille,
He's
yeah.
he's a restaurant
Oh,
critic, right?
yes.
Yep.
But I
Yes.
mean, he's just such a perfect jerk, and he's
Yep.
so full of himself. I mean, his name is Ego,
Sourpuss.
of course.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, I love what you're saying, that we are learning to consume media and come to it confident in our own perspective and sharing that perspective with others and hearing theirs. On the other hand, when we share our own perspective, how do we not so fully own that perspective that we shut each other down?
Well, if you remember the film Ratatouille,
I do.
glad you brought it up. It's actually the perfect example here because what happens at the end, I mean, that is actually a film about criticism,
Right.
Yeah.
if you think about it. And you can tell because it ends with the critic. He tastes the ratatouille, and he's brought back to this memory of having ratatouille that his mother made when he was a child, and it totally transforms him. And he thinks, oh, everything has changed. Good food can come from anywhere. It doesn't have to be this highly trained chef. And he says something like, "The new needs champions," right? And so the kind of moral of Ratatouille is that a critic is not someone who tears things apart. A critic is someone who looks for the good and champions it. And I think one way that I think about this is when I am write a pan, which is like a negative review. It is usually because I have gone in looking for the good and have been disappointed. C.S. Lewis wrote a little book called An Experiment in Criticism. I think he actually wrote it because he was getting bad reviews for the space trilogy, although I cannot prove this. But it's a wonderful book. And he said something in it like, we can only know if a book is bad if we start it expecting it to be very good, which I think is kind of a great line.
That's good.
Yeah, and I think that to use like Andy Crouch's line, I think changing our posture towards art and changing our posture when we're kind of writing about it or talking to our friends or however we're kind of practicing our criticism is the key. I'm not here to prove to you that I'm smart or that like I have the best opinion or like the
Yeah.
best taste. As a movie critic, I watch around 300 movies a year. Like, hopefully there are things that I can detect in a movie that maybe someone who isn't professionally obligated to watch that many movies might not. And so that is my job. And I go to a visual art critic, my friend who sits down the ends of the row for me, when I want him to tell me what shows should I be looking for, or like I'm thinking of going
Yeah.
to this, what should I be thinking about? Because not because he has better taste than me, but because he has a finely developed palate.
Yeah,
Good.
I
That's good.
think the suspicion of the media comes from this sense that the media has an agenda
Right.
for us as we consume it. And at Laity Lodge, which is the adult retreat center that is affiliated with the H. E. Butt Foundation, we often say we have an agenda, but we don't have an agenda for you. And
Hmm.
that means two things. First of all, we don't hand out a physical agenda, so people don't necessarily know what's happening from hour to hour. But also, it's a sense that we are who we are. We are bringing our beliefs to this work. And we invite you into that, but we don't need you to share it necessarily. We just need you to be with us and be open.
Yeah.
And last week at Laity Lodge, there was somebody talking about the media and its agenda for the good life, the way the media tells us what we're supposed to believe. You referenced the good life earlier in this podcast already. And so I want to just take a moment. This is Amy Julia Becker speaking last Friday, so deep from the Lady Lodge archives, talking about media.
Our culture is like a moving walkway, right? Like in the airport. And so if you're like, oh, I don't necessarily want to be formed and shaped by it, so I'm going to turn around. And what happens? Like you keep moving in the direction you don't want to be going unless you are like actively walking against it. And that's what's happening when our imagination is being shaped by the advertisements and images and assumptions that are coming at us all day long. And so our imagination for the good life, I'd say, is primarily shaped by two different kind of realms of imagination. One is materialism. So that's kind of money, beauty, celebrity. So we might say in this version of the good life belongs to the Instagram influencers. The good life belongs to the pop stars or to the investment bankers. But we also have a kind of moralism good life. And that can come by way of like getting good grades or having good behavior or having good habits, right? I eat a keto diet, or I go to CrossFit, or I give money away, or I go to church, or these are the ways that I am going to improve myself and know the good life.
What do you think, Alissa? Yeah, I mean, she talks about two different versions of the good life there, but just the whole idea, I would love to get your take.
There's a essay I write about in the book that Didion published in the New Yorker, I believe in 2000, about Martha Stewart. And this is before kind of the insider trading stuff happened. So it was just when Martha Stewart was becoming a lifestyle brand, and she was the original influencer, really. She was the kind of the first person of her type to turn herself into a lifestyle influencer brand. And she was brilliant at it. And Didion looked at her and saw a woman who had created a website. There's this air in the article of what is this website that you speak of, but she looks at it and she says, why are they here? Like, what are they interested in? Why are they commenting on these like boards devoted to this woman who like sits in her house in Connecticut and makes topiaries? And she realizes that what she represents to people is actually a combination of what Amy Julia was saying there, which is like both an aspirational businesswoman who's kind of got it all together, and also she has this beautiful life, that you just want to be part of, and it's this aesthetic, and she kind of combined the two. And in that way, she says Didion, this is very Didion, but she kind of sees her as the apex of the pioneer woman, of kind of American lore, that she like has the can-do spirit, but she also is like the domestic goddess. And she says that's a story we are taught to want to tell ourselves as like American women of a certain, she's talking about specifically her middle class white American women, but that's what we're supposed to want to be. But we see it replicated over and over and over again. And I think advertising is the most powerful place that we see it. Because, that's the job of the advertiser. I'm in the middle of a rewatch of Mad Men, which I haven't watched since it first aired. And it's really striking to me on this rewatch that so much of the show is about men trying to figure out what women want so they can sell stuff to them, and slowly coming to realize that maybe women should be the ones trying to sell stuff to women. But, that's tapping into the same thing that entertainment does. And it's no surprise to me that the entertainment business and the advertising business have been slowly merging on one another for decades at this point, to the point where you don't know when you're being sold something a lot of the time because they're packaged so tightly together.
Yeah. Like little Reese's Pieces set out for E.T. to follow.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, E.T. is such a funny one because there's actually Star Trek figurines in the background. And Star Trek was like 5 years old at the time. So it was, I think, the first moment in movie history where merch from a recent movie showed up in a movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, kind of wild.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
You're mentioning something that's making me think of a very hot topic, you're talking about kind of when we are affected by something without even realizing it. And it's of course making me think of AI. And we
Yes.
spoke a little bit about AI, but I think it's so important to dive in here because it's so top of mind for many of us
Yeah.
and just very timely. I read your piece in the New York Times about can we trust the documentaries that we see?
Yeah.
And it was troubling
Yes.
and enlightening and so many things. Can you just talk a
Yeah.
little bit about how AI is affecting the world of film and of documentary specifically? And you just speak a little bit to it in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's so vast that it's hard to wrap our heads around because even the term AI covers so many different
Right.
kinds of things. And it's also been kind of like retcons in a sense to cover things that weren't called AI in the past, but now they are so that people will invest in them. But in the article, I was talking specifically about AI video generators, which I think at this point, a lot of people are aware that a lot of the video they see on Facebook, for instance, is not real. Like if you see a cat playing a flute, like that's not real.
Didn't happen.
That
It
one's
didn't happen.
obvious.
No.
Hopefully.
But
Yeah.
also there's less obvious ones,
Right.
and it's becoming easier and easier to, mistakenly think that, this video of maybe a priest yelling at law enforcement is real, but it's not real. And it can be harder and harder to discern this. And these videos are being created often to gin up rage basically for clicks
Yep.
because somebody's going to benefit from it. Um, it's also just very easy to generate real looking video of normal things, of historical footage, or of just like somebody's living room or something like that, of a house on a corner of a street. And, there's no like harm done if you generate a picture of a house. Who cares, right? But in the documentary world, this is a real problem because your expectation, there's a level of trust that's expected by the viewer of a documentary that everything I see is real unless I'm told otherwise, or unless it's like a recreation and it's sort of visually indicated to me that these are actors, they're recreating something that happened. So it's very troubling when the possibility emerges that things you see in a documentary might not actually be real. They
Yeah.
might be generated video. And I was chatting with some folks at a documentary film festival who said, oh, yeah, I mean, we can't really talk about it, but the big streamers have asked because they're trying to push out content super fast because there's such an appetite for it. Well, can't you just create that scene?
Oh gosh.
Which is troubling on many levels, but also, no video just exists as a film anymore. It also is internet video, right? So you could clip out that clip and post it to the internet, and 20 years from now, somebody might just think that's real.
Somebody or AI
Or
could
AI.
think it's real.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And so we're muddying the historical record on top of everything else. And we're already in a time where it's hard to know what's real. But the fact that I really could, in 10 years, not be able to trust a single video I see, or next year or next month, is very troubling. And if you think about all the ways that video is used to, as evidence of human rights abuses around the world or things like that, this becomes very troubling. And there are governments around the world that will try to, use that and sort of say, oh, this is fake. This isn't actually happening. So that's what I was writing about.
Yeah.
It was, if you found that troubling, I was steeped in it for about 6 months, and I was calling people who were like, yeah, we don't know what we're going to do. And there's a huge need for people to really be thinking about this and thinking about, what kind of guardrails can we put out there? Because we should be caring about truth, right? That should be front and top of minds. And video evidence in court, it will not be a thing anymore. that should matter to us if we care about things like truth and justice. So all of that is part of my job here, because obviously we care about it too, a lot. And I think that AI is one part of it, but it is a really big part of it. There are lots and lots and lots of other ways that AI is affecting the movie business. It's in some ways it's kind of a test case for the ways it's going to affect everybody's lives. But
So
yeah.
if we have somebody listening to this and they say, "You're right, I don't actually know what to trust anymore in my feed. I thought that I thought possums dropped dead in a split second because it's so cute." This is one that I was taken in by. What are some practices? What are some practices you can give us, or you do yourself to help us focus on what is true, what is real, and what
Yeah.
is unfiltered or less filtered by these technologies that can just be so confusing?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, some of it is, skepticism. And I think we as a culture have learned that in the sense that we learned it around photographs, right? We all became aware of photoshopping at some point and became
Why
aware
does she
that
have
if
3 hands?
yeah.
What's happening? Yeah.
We realized at some point that the covers of magazines probably had been photoshopped, right?
Yeah.
We need to start doing the same thing with videos, and
Mm.
I'm hoping that we'll get there. But we also need to be there are people who are out there who are doing the work to educate us on here are the telltale signs, right? Um, so we need to seek those out, and we need to look at them and we need to send them to our friends and our family and say, you should watch this. If our friends and our family are sending us videos and saying, isn't this cute? Sometimes you have to say, yeah, but this isn't real, right? And, sometimes it's a bummer to do that, but you have to do it. I also see this thing happen, unfortunately, where people will post something and people underneath will say, that's not real, and they'll say, yeah, but I like it, and they'll keep it up. Like, we can't do that. We should draw a hard line and say, this isn't true, I'm taking it down, and I'm going to make another post that says, I posted something, I realized it wasn't true.
Yep.
Like, here's how I know, because the more we're doing this, the more we're injecting truth back into the ecosystem instead of letting the lie be out there.
I was just going to say, I know that we're over time, and I feel like we would be remiss if we don't note that at the time of this recording, the Oscars are just around the corner. And sitting with us is a New York Times film critic. Can you just tell us what you're most excited about? Any things that you're really happy that the nom list came out the way it did? Any of your favorites that you want to mention? Any just sad snubs that you've seen? Tell us anything you'd like.
Yeah, a couple things. Overall, I thought they were pretty good nominations this year, which I can't say every year, but I have thought the quality of nominations have been going up over the past few years. I hope that people think of the Oscars as kind of handing you a watch list and telling you, like, these are really good movies, and if you haven't seen them, here's some good movies that you might want to see.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, oh, they're out of touch with America or whatever, which is the story people like to spin. I think, these are movies picked by people who work in the industry, so they will have seen them and they're telling you, we think these are the ones that were best this year. I really like, Sinners. I really like One Battle
That's
After
so
Another.
good.
I think these are great movies, and they're thinkers too. You kind of watch
Yeah.
them and you keep thinking about them, and that's exciting to me. And it was exciting to see Sinners in particular be a movie that was one of the most critically acclaimed movies of the year and one of the highest box office earners. That doesn't ever happen or rarely happens. So that was really cool. I was thrilled to see Delroy Lindo get nominated for his role in that film too. I have been rooting for that man for ages, and I screamed on my couch at 6 o'clock in the morning when that nomination came out. So that was really exciting. I'll tell you one movie that did not make it onto the nominations list, but for some people might be something they might want to seek out, is the movie The Testament of Anne Lee, which is about the founder of the Shaker religious group, which is the splinter group off the Quakers. It's a strange movie. I will warn you, it's a very odd movie. But if you're into kind of odd movies about splinter religious groups, you really couldn't do better than this one.
My favorite genre.
Also, I grew up near where the Shakers sort of landed when they came to America. And, they have beautiful music and furniture and all of that. But it's really about the woman who founded the sect. She had very strange ideas. But if you're kind of into like strange 17th century religious groups, it's a great, great movie. Totally worth seeking out.
Well, thank you so much for that recommendation.
I told Marcus and our producer Rob before you were on the call that I have not seen a lot of the movies that are up this year, and I am inspired to. I love your idea of this being kind of a list of things that you can go and choose from. So it's really helpful.
Yeah, it's a menu, right? It's a menu
Yeah.
at a good restaurant, and everything you order is going to be good and interesting. And you might like the chicken more than the fish. I am so excited to see Sinners on this list. I love Sinners because it's somehow both very thinky, like you said, but also a popcorn movie. And
completely.
It's so fascinating to see those things work together, mostly, but it's just really, really good.
It is. And, and you take that one and you contrast it with a movie that is also on the list, like Train Dreams, which is like a very small, meditative movie about a guy living his life, in the Northwest. And that's such a wide range of movies to all land on the same list. And that one is equally amazing. So I just think they did a pretty good job picking them this year.
All right. Happy. Go Hollywood. We can do this.
Yes. Alissa, we have talked a lot about your book, We Tell Ourselves Stories. And it is out now, correct? And coming out on paperback soon. Is that right?
It'll be out in paperback in June, but it's out in hardcover wherever you get your books.
Yeah, it's also on Audible. If you like audio reading,
I read it.
We have Alissa herself reading it. It's quite good.
Yes. Yeah, it was really good. Awesome. Well, we hope everyone will pick up the book. And you also have other books I was reading about. I haven't gotten to read Salty. Is that right?
That's right.
But just tell us a little bit about that one too as we wrap up.
Yeah, Salty is a collection of short essays, I guess, about women from history who I admire, artists, activists, writers, but all through the lens of food. And there are recipes and illustrations. It is a very good gift book, but it I think is also a real fun read.
And I think there's one about zombies too, right?
There is. There is. I co-wrote a book called How to Survive the Apocalypse, in which we write about, about the philosopher Charles Taylor, but that's the quiet part. We write about the apocalypse in pop culture and how to survive the apocalypse, which we're attempting to do.
So good.
Fantastic.
Well, I'm just grateful for our conversation today because it really brought so many things top of mind that are timely. These ideas of the stories that we tell ourselves and how we're framing things, spinning things, how they affect us. That's important. It's really important. So just thank you for your work and thank you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. This has been really great.
The Echoes podcast is written and produced by Camille Hull-Ortega, Rob Stinnett, and me, Marcus Goodyear. It's edited by Rob Stinnett and Kim Stone. Our executive producers are Patton Dodd and David Rogers. Our original music is by Johnny Rogers. Special thanks to our guest today, New York Times film critic Alissa Wilkinson. Alissa, do you subscribe to Echoes Magazine?
Oh, of course.
And you, too, can subscribe to echoesmagazine.org. You'll receive a beautiful print magazine each quarter. It's free. You can find a link in our show notes. The Echoes podcast and Echoes Magazine are both productions brought to you by the H.E.B.F. Foundation. You can learn more about our vision and mission at hebfdn.org. If you've enjoyed this episode, follow us wherever you listen to podcasts and be sure to leave a review because it matters.